So I am off to drive to Sacramento to see Oppenheimer in 70mm IMAX. Uh, why am I doing this? Probably because I'm a bit of an idiot, but I really want to see Oppenheimer in 70mm IMAX. I think it's going to be worth it. Last time when Dunkirk came out, I went all the way down to San Francisco to see it there. And then I watched it again in Sacramento. Two different types, the rounded screen versus the flat screen. I think the flat screen's better. So I sure hope this is worth it. So my initial reaction, was it worth driving about 4 or 5 hours to come see Oppenheimer on the 70mm IMAX? Yeah, it was worth it to me. Okay, so there's three things that I want to talk about in relation to Oppenheimer, seeing it on the IMAX. One would have to do with the visuals. Two has to do with the sound, and then three has to do with the story itself and whether it needed to be or didn't really need to be on IMAX. So the last time I saw an IMAX movie was Dunkirk, and I went down to San Jose and saw it on the big sort of dome where it's like curved around, and even though we were about 3/4 of the way up, still it was like the edge of the screens are in my peripheral vision. So at no point could I see the whole image. I have to look around to actually see it. Now, the next day, driving home, I stopped in Sacramento, and I saw it again on the flat screen, and also there wasn't a lot of people in the theater, and I was able to sit back and see the whole thing. And I'm glad I saw both. But the funny thing is, the one that really stuck with me is where it was the dome, and even though I really couldn't see the whole screen, what stuck with me about that is just how immersive it was. And part of that immersive experience wasn't just the visuals, it was also the sound. So when I went and watched Oppenheimer, I guess I wasn't expecting it to be so busy. I didn't buy my tickets that far in advance and wasn't sure exactly when I was going to get down there. And so I was sitting in the second row, and so spending the whole time looking up at the screen. And now I could see, because it was actually sort of still out in front of me, I could see the whole thing. Without having to look around the whole time. But at the same time, there were times where if it was a close-up, the image would be the faces would be slightly distorted. So as long as it wasn't a close-up, I could see it pretty good. But there were still things where it was like, I sure wish I was a little further back from this screen. I think I would have enjoyed it a little bit more if I was further back. Now that being said, if you can see this movie on IMAX, and especially if you can see it on the 70mm, which I know is not easy, it's not very accessible, and that's why I had to drive so far to see it myself, but if you can do that, I'd say it's well worth it. I mean, visually, it's incredible. It's incredibly beautiful, and if you really like film, and you like the way film looks, and you want to see the absolute best version of this movie you can see, well, 70mm IMAX is the absolute best version of this film. Chris Nolan makes full use of the visuals of this movie. But the second thing that's so important about it is the sound. And IMAX theaters it's not just about how big the screen is, it's the sound system. And it's incredible, the immersive nature of the visuals combined with the sound. Christopher Nolan really knows how to use sound, and I know a lot of people complain about his sound and how the the dialogue is inaudible, and people are going to complain about this movie as well, because there are some scenes where the dialogue is not audible or barely audible. It's going to be very difficult for people to understand some of the things, and that is absolutely the point. It doesn't matter what they're saying. It's the whole experience. It's the subjective, experiential perspective of Oppenheimer that you're being put into his head. And that is what's so amazing. That's what's so beautiful about, technically, about the film, the visuals, the sound, but also just the storytelling of it. It's incredible. And I will say Tenet, Christopher Nolan, Tenet, not my favorite film, but I think it's an absolutely great movie. Saw it on a regular theater. That one I just braved going out during COVID and seeing it in a regular theater. But to me, the whole point of that movie is it does not matter what people are saying. It doesn't matter how the whole time travel all works. You're just supposed to just let the subjective experience overwhelm you and just feel the thing, okay? Same with Oppenheimer. And that's why it's so amazing to see it in this format. It's the best way to feel the movie. And the most important thing about film, the most important thing about it as an art form, is its ability to put you into the subjective experience of a character, and to come as close as possible to seeing the world through somebody else's sensory experience. Anyways, so for that, it was great. Not just the visuals, but the sound. The sound is absolutely incredible, absolutely amazing. And so you may not need to see it on 70 millimeter. Just make sure you go see it at a place that has good sound. And to me, that is the absolutely most important thing about what's going to get people to theaters in the future. It's not necessarily even the visuals; it's the sound. Because people might have a big screen TV, or they can get a projector at home, and they can get a really good quality visual. They will never get the sound at home that they can get in a theater. But if directors don't bother to create a soundscape that is just worth listening to, and that puts you into the film, then yeah, sure, watch it at home. And finally, the story of Oppenheimer. I'm not going to tell you everything that happens. So I'll just make some comments. One is the nature of the black and white is more of an objective perspective, or it's not Oppenheimer's perspective. The color is Oppenheimer's perspective, and it's really cool how those play out, and how you see things in one way and then you see it later in another way. That was really interesting how that's done. Some people might be worried about this film glorifying Oppenheimer and just like trying to make him into a saint. Here's the guy who, and he didn't personally invent the atomic bomb all by himself, but here's the guy who led the invention of the atomic bomb, and we're just going to excuse him for that and say, hey, he was a hero. I don't think the movie does that at all. I think it does a good job of presenting his perspective, and a good job of saying he's not a perfect person, but he was doing what he thought was right. And it's not necessarily making a judgment on was it right or was it wrong. There are definitely things that you're going to end up feeling like this was a terrible thing that happened. So anyways, I don't think it glorifies or tries to make Oppenheimer into some sort of saint who had no faults. So that's all I'll say about that particular aspect of the story. It's not just conventional storytelling. It's just a very creative way of telling a story, combining some very experimental kinds of things and the visuals, the sounds, non-linear storytelling, to just give you a full feeling of who this person is and what he went through. Um, and then finally, I'll say one more thing, and that has to do with IMAX. I would say that Christopher Nolan does a great job of just maximizing like why this needs to be on IMAX through almost the entire movie. But maybe the last 15 minutes, there gets a point where um, I'd say it's not like it's bad, but there were some times where I was like, okay, it just sort of shifted, and it was almost like, okay, now we got to get through the story, the end of it, and it just didn't quite. There was times there was about 15 minutes. I was like, this really didn't need to be on IMAX. So out of what, nearly 3 hours, only 15 minutes feeling like, okay, I could have watched this on a TV. I'd say that's pretty good. Great movie. If you're all possible, see it at the best way you can. And if that's IMAX, then do it.